Welcome to Calm, Cash and Liability Mastery. Today, we're going to talk about understanding credit. What's the game of credit? What's the object? What are the key rules? What are the key concepts? And what are the key actions you must take to maintain good credit? First, there's awareness that you're playing a game. Are you aware you're playing a game? Yes or no? Hopefully, at the end of this, you'll answer yes. Do I have a choice whether to play or not? Now, you can debate this, but if you're playing the game of money and you're borrowing, you are playing the game of credit. So you really don't have a choice. You need to learn to play the game. Will my performance playing the game have a financial impact? Yes, it will. Like any game, the outcome of that game is an impact of your score. Can I know how well I'm playing the game today? Absolutely. It's very easy to know and understand how you're playing the game by looking at your overall credit score. And can I learn how to play the game to win? Absolutely. You can learn to play this game in a way that can allow you to win it consistently over time. But first, you have to understand that you're playing a game. Now, within any game, there's often a score, whether you're playing Monopoly or basketball. So it's called a credit score for a reason. It's the score that tells you how well you're playing the game. And the score simply is a 3-digit number. And that number is evaluating your risk. The most widely used credit scores are FICO scores. And that score typically ranges between 350 and 850. Now, what does your score mean? Think about if you're going to lend someone money, in a way you're placing a bet. And the bet is the likelihood that you'll repay that debt with interest over time. If your score is over 800, you have a 1 in about 1,292 chance. So think about that. If it's a home loan or a credit card loan, and you're looking at a score, as that score goes down, you'll notice that the odds go up, meaning that the lender, if they were to do a loan for you and your current score is 500 to 600, they'd have to ask themselves, am I willing to do a loan where I believe 1 out of every 8 people that I loan to will in fact not repay my mortgage or my credit card debt or my car loan over time with interest? And if they are going to do that loan, they'll have to increase that interest to offset that risk. So you need to understand as a key concept, this game of credit is played individually. Each player has their own score. But if you're playing, for example, with a couple or with a partner, the lowest score for that particular team is the score that you'll use as a team. So if a husband and wife have an 800 and a 600, they'll largely look to the 600 because imagine that husband were to die or the wife were to be left with the house. She now is the credit risk in that scenario if that were to happen. So what's the object of the game? With most games, the idea is you want to achieve the highest possible score. And by achieving the highest score, the financial impact is you reduce your cost of borrowing for mortgage, auto, credit, college, and business. You reduce your cost of investment. Products such as life insurance, auto insurance, homeowner insurance are impacted by credit scores. Your utility bills can be lower because cell phone, gas, and other bills are lower for people in some cases with lower credit scores or higher credit scores. And credibility, employment, background checks, and public records. All of these things can impact your ability to earn. Imagine a former bankruptcy or a low credit score being pulled in a background check and affecting your character, which might affect your opportunity for a new job. So this is a very big game. A lot of people don't realize that 80% of Americans have one or more error on their credit report. 40% of Americans are paying a higher mortgage payment due to a lower than necessary credit score. meaning that they actually could have a higher score if they played this game better. and by having a higher score, have a lower interest rate. And 25% of Americans have credit report problems that would prevent them from securing a new loan or new employment. When I say this is a big game, on a $260,000 30-year fixed mortgage, over time, the difference in annual cost for someone with a very high credit score, as you'll see down here in the blue, versus a low credit score up here, as you can see, is quite dramatic. But over 30 years, if that credit problem stays there consistently, it could increase the cost of borrowing by over $1 million on a $260,000 mortgage loan with compounding. So 70% of your ability to access your house money is tied to that score, because so much of the weighting for the decision is based on those odds. So what does not affect your credit score? That's one thing to think about initially. My education doesn't affect my credit score. How many years I've lived in one location doesn't affect my score. My income, my late payments that are less than 30 days past due, late utility payments, well, they don't really hurt you unless they become a collection. Bounce checks don't hurt you unless it becomes a collection. And again, collection meaning it shows up on your credit report. Rent history doesn't really affect your credit score unless you're evicted or it becomes a collection. Child support and alimony doesn't affect you unless you don't pay it on time. Your age, race, religion, nationality, gender, or marital status don't affect your credit score. Job occupation or employment history. Inquiries you make into your own credit report. Inquiries an employer makes into your credit report for new hiring. These do not affect your credit score. But what does affect your credit score? Well, a great deal. So all of your account payment information, public records, judgments, liens, and collections, duration of account that is past due, amount that is past due, the recency of past due items, the number of delinquent items, the number of accounts you have in good standing, the amounts you owe on all accounts, the amounts you owe on individual accounts, the type of balance you carry, the number of accounts with balances, the rate at which you're using the accounts, the balance as a percentage of what you borrowed, the average time your accounts have been open, the time since accounts open, the time since last activity, the portion of new to old accounts, the number of inquiries, the time since last inquiry, prior problems, and the mix of credit types. All of these things go into playing this game of credit. And I would think, because when I first saw this, I was immediately overwhelmed. How do you play a game where that many elements are being considered? So first you need to know what does and does not affect your credit score, because that's a big part of playing the game, knowing how you score. Now, if you took all of those criteria, those 22 criteria that go into a credit score, they really fit into 5 key buckets. And we're going to call those 5 key rules that you can use to play the game of credit. So payment history is about 35% of those 22 criteria, and the weighting of that fall into simply the history of your making your payments. 30% into your utilization rate. In other words, how much of the credit I have available am I actually having to use on a day-to-day basis? The length of time. How long have I have a history of making those payments? That's 15%. The types of credit. Do I have a wide variety of different types of credit? And inquiries. How many people are currently looking into my credit as in my credit history? That shows that I could be about to borrow more, or maybe I need to borrow more for a particular reason. So key concept, you can affect about 80% of your score in playing the game well by just understanding those 5 key areas and 5 simple rules. So what are the 5 simple rules? If you take each of those 5 elements and you break it down to a simple rule, for the 35% payment history, make all payments within 30 days of the due date. If your due date is April 15th, make sure that payment has been made in full within 30 days, and you will resolve the majority of the issues that tie to your payment history and your credit score. Your utilization rate. Keep all balances under 30% of their high credit limit. That means if you have a credit card that has a limit of $10,000, try to keep your average borrowing below $3,000. If you go above that amount, you might want to split it across 2 cards and then pay them in full at the end of that cycle within 30 days. By keeping your average balances under 30% of their high credit limit, you'll maximize your utilization rate scoring. Length of history. Keep all accounts open and active for as long as possible. That may seem counterintuitive, but having a credit account open for more years has a positive impact on your overall score. Don't close out a credit card if you're no longer using it, unless maybe you're trying to save money on fees. But if possible, keep that account open and convert it to a non-paying, a non-cost credit card. The types of credit. Try to keep at least 5 active accounts at all times. If you can have different accounts, that's fine. And don't borrow just to improve your credit score to pay interest. You don't need to do that. But you might want to have 4 or 5 different credit cards that you have that are no-fee cards. You might have a line of credit on your equity line or things like that that keep those open and active. And if possible, use them, meaning use them and pay them off on a regular basis. Draw down occasionally on your line and pay it back the next month. Again, this is all about, it's like a plant that you're taking care of. You want to make sure it gets fresh air and you want to make sure it gets some sun and some water. In playing this game, you're playing the game. You're saying, I'm going to have at least 5 accounts. I'm going to keep the history open for as long as possible. I'm going to keep the average balances under that 30% limit whenever I can. I'm going to make all payments within 30 days. And lastly, keep your information private. Don't allow someone just to pull an inquiry because they want to. Be very selective about when you allow someone to access your credit information. In our next session, we'll talk more about taxes.